picture of the flower in the roots part of the square root label here means that to find the square root, we're really looking for the root of how we made the square. So, to make this square, what was the first thing we would have done? Well, we would have made one side and we would have said, okay, that's 6 inches long. Let's make this one 4 to have another example. And instead of calling it inches, I'm going to call it units because each one of these little spaces here can be a unit. So sometimes you'll just see it drawn like this. I'm making a square. The root of making this square is to take a side and make all of them that same length. So make all of them 4. That's how we make a square. So the root of this square was 4. That's what I started with when I made this square. Now, the area of this square just so happens to be 4 times 4. That's how we find the area. The area of this square happens to be 4 times 4. So it's 16 of these little square units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 is the area of this square. The root to make the square was 4. That's all a square root is. So if we look at any number and we want to find the square root, we're really trying to decide what number times itself, gave us the number we're trying to find the square root of. So let's look at an example. We're trying to see the square root, and that's the symbol, and I don't do a very good job of drawing it, the square root of 36. That means we want to know what's the root that'll make a square of 36. Well, we know that. We've already done it. The root that will make a square of 36 is 6 because 6 times itself gives us 36. So the square root of 36 is 6 because 6 times 6 is 36. Let's try another one. The square root of 16. So that means what number times itself will give me 16? Well, we know that because we just made a square of 16. 4 times itself will give us 16. So the square root of 16 is 4 because 4 times itself is 16. So that's how we find the square root of a number. We figure out what number times itself will give us the number we're trying to find the square root of. So we've got square roots for all kinds of numbers. We have the square root of 1. Well, what number times itself gives us 1? Well, that'd be 1. So the square root of 1 is 1. Well, how about the square root of 4? Well, what number times itself gives us 4? It's 2, because 2 times 2 gives us 4. What's the square root of 9? It's 3, because 3 times 3 gives us 9. The square root of 16 is 4, because 4 times 4 gives us 16. The square root of 25 is 5, because 5 times 5 gives us 25. The square root of 36 is 6, because 6 times 6 gives us 36. The square root of 49 is 7, because 7 times 7 gives us 49. The square root of 64 is 8, because 8 times 8 gives us 64. I would recommend knowing all of these down through the square root of 196. Now, the square root of 196, that's hard. I don't know offhand what number times itself is 196, but I kind of do because it's one that I should have memorized. Now, for sure, we should have the square root of 144 memorized because when we learned our multiplication tables, we learned them through 12. Most students are taught to memorize them through 12. So 12 times 12 is 144. Now, 13 is going to be the answer to square root of 169. And I always just kind of remembered when I had to memorize this that if 169 gives me 13, then the square root of 196 those numbers kind of flipped, is going to be 14. So, and then of course 9, 10, 11 would be in there as well. So I would recommend memorizing those because it will make your life so much easier. You should have your multiplication tables memorized anyway. So you should know every number up through 12 times itself, because when we multiply, when we memorize our multiplication tables, we practice multiplying. For example, 4 times 1, 4 times 2, 4 times 3, 4 times 4. So that was in there. So we should have that one memorized. Now, multiplying all of these make it very easy to remember how to find the square root of a number when it makes a perfect square. Now, we're going to discuss in another video what to do if the number is something like, oh no, square root of 18. That's going to be hard because I already know that 4 times 4 is 16 and 5 times 5 is 25, and oh my gosh, there wasn't something in between. Well, there is something in between, and that's what we'll discuss in the next video. But for now, hopefully you better understand what a square root is, how to find it, and that you need to memorize some basic square roots. Thanks for watching.